Hey, what's going on, folks? It's your boy New Jack coming to you live, making it hot once again. In today's video, I'm going to give y'all my NBA playoff predictions. For the first round, I'm going to give y'all who I believe is going to win each round. All right, let's make it hot, shall we? Looking at the first matchup, San Antonio versus Dallas. The series is tied 1-1, and Dallas has looked good in the first two games. Gave San Antonio a little bit of problems. But I believe San Antonio will win this series in Game 6. Looking at the second matchup, Oklahoma City versus Memphis. And Memphis is leading this series 2-1. And Memphis has looked good. And they're a good team. And I believe this series will go 7 games. But I have Oklahoma City coming back to win this series in Game 7 at Oklahoma City. Let's move right along. Our third matchup, Portland versus Houston. And Portland is leading this series 2-0. And they won both of their games at Houston. And I will say this, I have Portland sweeping this series. Yes, I said it. Houston is not looking good. And Portland is on a mission. They have a good team this year. And they played good all year. So I have Portland sweeping Houston in this series 4-0, a complete sweep. Looking at our final matchup in the Western Conference, the LA Clippers versus the Golden State Warriors. And I will say this, I believe this series is going to 7 games. And I have the LA Clippers defeating the Golden State Warriors in Game 7 at LA. So for my second round in the Western Conference, looks like this. I have San Antonio playing Portland, and I have Oklahoma City playing against the LA Clippers. Now, let's look at the Eastern Conference, starting with Indiana versus Atlanta. And Atlanta is up 2-1 for right now. And I will say this, it looks like this series is going to 7 games. But I have Indiana winning this series at home in Game 7 to beat the Atlanta Hawks. So I have Indiana winning this series in Game 7. Now, let's look at our second matchup. Reason why I'm rolling my eyes, because I live here in Charlotte, North Carolina. You know, I'm not a Charlotte Bobcats fan. I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan. But I still cheer for the local teams. But anyways, Miami versus Charlotte. And Miami is up 2-0. And everybody knows this already. Miami is going to sweep Charlotte. They play here in Charlotte this Saturday. And I might go to the game. All depends how I feel. But I have Miami sweeping Charlotte 4-0 to sweep the Bobcats to move on to the second round. And now, let's look at our third matchup. the Washington Wizards versus the Chicago Bulls. And it is not looking good for Chicago. And I have Washington winning this series in Game 5 to win this series 4-1. In our last matchup out of the Eastern Conference, Brooklyn versus Toronto. This series is tied 1-1. And I believe this series will go to 7 games. And I have the Brooklyn Nets defeating the Toronto Raptors in Game 7. I believe the Brooklyn Nets will advance in the second round. So, this is how my second round out of the Eastern Conference looks like. Miami versus Brooklyn. Indiana versus Washington out of the Eastern Conference in the second round. All right, let's look at our first matchup in the second round in the Western Conference. The San Antonio Spurs versus the Portland Trail Blazers. I believe this series will go 7 games. Both teams, they're playing good basketball. But in that 7th game at San Antonio, I have to give the edge to the Spurs. So I have San Antonio defeating Portland in Game 7 in the second round. In our second matchup, Oklahoma City versus the LA Clippers. And I believe this series as well is going 7 games. But I have Oklahoma City defeat the LA Clippers in Game 7 at Oklahoma City. So, for my Western Conference Finals, I have the San Antonio Spurs playing against the Oklahoma City Thunder. As we all know, that the Oklahoma City defeated San Antonio in the season 4 straight times. But it's the playoffs. It's a different atmosphere. The Spurs, they have home court. They are hungry to go back to the NBA Finals. I believe this series will go 7 games. And of course, in Game 7 at San Antonio, I have the Spurs defeating the Oklahoma City Thunder to advance back to the NBA Finals. Going back to the East Side, baby. To the East Side, yeah. Let's look at our first matchup. Indiana versus Washington. And I will say this. The way Washington is playing, it is no telling who's going to win this series. But I have Indiana defeating Washington in Game 6. So I have Indiana advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. And for our second matchup, Miami versus Brooklyn. Even though Brooklyn has defeated Miami 4 times in the season, I don't see Brooklyn beat Miami in the playoffs. But I will say this. I believe this series is going to 7 games. But that final game at Miami is going to be too tough for Brooklyn. So that's why I have Miami defeating Brooklyn to go back to the Eastern Conference Finals in Game 7. So, on the East side, my matchups look like this for the Eastern Conference Finals. Miami versus Indiana. And I will say this. I've said it all along. Whoever gets the number 1 seed out of the East will win the Eastern Conference. But the way Indiana is playing, I have to give the edge to the Miami Heat. I believe this series is going 7 games. But that final 7th game, even though it's going to be at Indiana, I don't see Indiana defeating Miami. But that could change. They need to step it up, just a little bit throughout the first round. I might change my mind, but for right now, it looks like Miami is going to win the East. So I have Miami defeating Indiana in Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals to go back to the NBA Finals. So, can I get a drum roll? We are back with the same 2 teams as last year. San Antonio versus Miami. And guess who has home court this time? The San Antonio Spurs. So, revenge is sweet. I have the San Antonio Spurs defeating the Miami Heat in Game 7. I believe this series will go 7 games. And that final game at San Antonio is going to be hell for the Miami Heat. I have the San Antonio Spurs winning the 5th championship, which they should have won last year in Game 6, but they messed it up. But it's a new year, and revenge is going to be sweet for the San Antonio Spurs. I hope y'all enjoyed this. There's more videos coming at y'all this week. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. Love, peace, and joy. Go Spurs throughout the playoffs. I will make some more videos this week. So y'all stay tuned for those videos. And make a